Welcome to BFC Live, the daily video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. BFC Live highlights the companies, brands, people, and trends driving the global cannabis sector. Learn more at businessofcannabis.ca. Our guest today on BFC Live is Denis Adigamov of the CannDelta team. We wanted to connect with him today to talk about security considerations up and down the cannabis supply chain. Thanks for being here, Denis.
No problem, Jay. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you. We like to start off many Mondays with the team from CannDelta because we get lots of questions. We have lots of questions. You guys get lots of questions, but the difference between you getting them and us getting them is you actually have answers. And so we got a slew of questions about security in cannabis. And the questions come in around security around retail, security around cultivation. I mean, sometimes security around actually moving product, but you've been working on security plans for some time. Like, I wanted to get your thoughts, your thinking, how you approach it. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's be honest. You got to know how to protect your stash, right? This is the cannabis space.
You do, and it's not as easy as like getting a padlock, obviously. And I know I know the most famous requirement that went away was like a vault many years ago, like a huge, massive vault. But like,
Yeah.
people still have vaults, but the vaults have changed shape and sizes, and now we have retail too. Like, when you approach it, like, what are you thinking about?
I've been helping clients work on their security designs for the last years, and I've developed some philosophies and considerations during that time that I want to talk about. First, there's about three main ways that security is implemented. One would be through visual surveillance cameras to record video. Two would be our intrusion detection system. So that could be your motion sensors, your glass break sensors, door contacts. And these are all devices that tell you if there's an intruder. And then the third way we have security implementation is through access control. The most basic of which would be key locks, but also this can be done using pin pads and card readers. When we're talking about security, let's start off on the retail side. In Ontario, there's not too much that's required. Really, the bare minimum would be having your security cameras in the secure storage, the retail space, and the age gate area. And it's enough to have just key locks for access control. But let's be honest, would you be comfortable holding over $100,000 of product behind cameras and keys only?
I would not be.
Yeah, me too. My own personal stash has better security. I usually advise those retail clients to also at least secure their perimeter. So that would be door contacts on all the exterior doors to alarm in case somebody's trying to break through them, and glass break sensors on your windows with security film as well. You can also have motion sensors to protect the perimeter, but that more so depends on the individual's risk tolerance and how much they could afford. It's not a bad idea, but it's not a requirement. In terms of access control, I'm not a huge fan of key locks, especially for doors that are accessed by a lot of employees. So this could be a door like a staff entrance, a secure storage, or a door into a common staff-only area. If one employee loses a key, you're stuck replacing all of those locks.
Right.
So fobs end up being cheaper in the long run. Usually, security systems for retails can vary from $10,000 to $50,000 or so, depending on the size and extent of security that the individual might want. But the next step up from retail would be your federal cannabis license holders. So that's your cultivators, processors, your nurseries.
That's a big deal. The price goes up considerably from 10 and 50 up into the 6 and 7 figures, I'd imagine.
Well, it does, but it doesn't always have to. Okay. And you might be a bit surprised for the micros and the nurseries. But the first thing whenever I start working with a federal license holder is you need to determine what your site perimeter is. Now, most of the time, that's like the building envelope, the walls of the building. Sometimes that could just be a section of the building if there's multiple tenants. But it could also be a fence perimeter for outdoor grows. But it's really important to consider what you define as a site perimeter, because that's where your first ring of security starts. Health Canada pushes this concept of rings of security, and it's something that I also keep in mind when I work on security designs. And in terms of complexity for these security systems, the micros and the nurseries, they have very few requirements. So really what they need is a physical barrier for the site perimeter, which I said is usually the building or a fence for an outdoor grow. And they need a physical barrier for the secure storage. Now, following that rings of security concept, ideally your secure storage should be near the middle of the facility with a convenient route to your shipping and receiving bay for deliveries. And the only other requirement is that those micros and nurseries require access control. But like I said, it can be accomplished with just a lock and a key, and it would be acceptable, but it isn't really advised for the reason I mentioned earlier. You don't want to be stuck replacing all those locks
all the time, right?
Yeah, and that will happen all the time.
Yeah.
So they don't even need cameras or intrusion detection for these micros and nurseries. But let's be real, if you don't install any of these things, you're going to have a bad time when it comes around to reporting to Health Canada. Most thefts do occur internally. That's why it's imperative that they also have sufficient visual monitoring in the secure storage, right? That's where the product's going to be stored. That's where it's moving in and out of often. And we also advise that they install visual cameras in the shipping and receiving bay to capture any of the transfer that occurs. Now, although intrusion detection isn't required, I still highly always suggest having that perimeter intrusion detection. You want to know if someone's trying to break in before they actually get where they're trying to get to.
Right.
You need that extra time. So, like I mentioned, perimeter intrusion detection, that's your door contacts in the doors, glass break sensors, security film, and motion sensors. When we're talking about the big security systems, that's when you're talking about the standard licenses, standard cultivators and processors. They need complete visual monitoring of the exterior perimeter. So when we have that site perimeter that I mentioned, they'll need complete visual monitoring outside of it, around it. They need complete interior motion capture and visual coverage of the operation rooms. And I want to be specific with these definitions of operation rooms. In cannabis terms, it's a room where there are cannabis activities going on. So that could be trimming, packaging, and extracting, but it doesn't include grow rooms. So to clarify, you need complete interior visual capture of your operation rooms, not including your grow rooms. Those ones don't need visual and motion capture inside because, you know, there's flowing wind and plants that could set off false alarms, but they need the cameras outside of the rooms to capture people going in and out.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the storage bills of all the data.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad. Usually it's a lot of cameras depending on the racking system that's involved. You can also use seismic sensors to do the perimeter of the secure storage, but they also need intrusion detection on the site perimeter.
Right.
Often this is done through motion sensors. That's how I usually do it for my clients, having motion sensors covering the interior perimeter. Mm-hmm. But for an outdoor grow where there's a fence that is being defined as your site perimeter, you could use something like a microphonic fence sensor that can tell when someone is trying to cut through or climb it. Mm-hmm. Some common issues that I've experienced with these cannabis company security systems is that they might be poorly focused. They might have a floor plan that isn't necessarily efficient and requires extra security features just to stay within technical requirements for compliance. I find that a really simple layout is having a corridor that goes to cannabis operation rooms on either side. Simple and effective.
Yeah.
Another common issue that I see is over-compliant facilities, where they have way too many cameras, way too many access controls. You don't need a card reader going in and out of every single room, or even in and out of every single operation room. For the operation rooms, you need to have the access control going in there. That would be your card reader. But going out, you can have something like a request to exit motion sensor. For reference, that's what opens the doors when you're leaving a Walmart.
Yeah.
You walk up to it, doors open. It doesn't open for you in these cannabis companies, but it'll unlock the door.
Right.
The only room that really does need to have the access control in and out would be the secure storage. And it's just easier because it does automatically log everyone that's coming in and out of the rooms, which is required. And then there are some business owners that do want to know exactly when certain people leave their buildings. So they might want to have an out on their staff entrance side. This is a really important thing to keep in mind, because if you have all these card readers, for example, and I've seen this in a lot of companies that have card readers in and out of every single room, you need to have a lot more door controllers to control them, and things can get really, really pricey with that. Something else that's required for standards, but not really for micros, is having separate security partitions. So what that means is splitting the security of your site into zones, such as an office security zone, operations zone, your perimeter security, and your secure storage. So in practical terms, what that means is if somebody needs to go to the office, they'll go and they'll have to disarm the general office security so they don't think someone's breaking in.
Right.
But that would have no effect on the security devices in the secure storage or the site perimeter.
Right. Because of zones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about all the places that I've been and how this all now I understand what's going on. Why we have to swipe on some doors and why some doors, once you get in, some places are, it's interesting. And I'm sure people who are listening to this, who are not as attuned to it as you and the team at CannDelta, now understand it a lot better.
Well, I'd hope so. A lot of it does come down to like the technicalities of the type of space, an operations area versus a general area. In terms of costs, it can vary so greatly. Like for the micros and the nurseries, there were pretty minimal requirements. So it could start at somewhere like, say, $50,000, and it can easily go over $1 million, depending on the scale of the license and the size of the facility. Yeah. Really, having a good security system design from the start goes a long way in case you ever do have to deal with an investigation. And it could even help save you from liability by having your records in check. Yeah. And if you ever actually want to expand, like expand your site perimeter and so on to allow more activities, it's way easier to integrate new devices and zones into a well-designed facility rather than a poor one.
Like anything else, almost.
Yeah. And you mentioned the vaults and stuff. So that was actually from the previous physical security directive for controlled substances. Now we see actually, they don't require those vaults anymore for the general cannabis licenses. But now with the upcoming psychedelics market and the interest in these dealers licenses, this is becoming a relevant topic again. So drugs that contain cannabis and those controlled psychedelics substances those do fall within those physical security directives, which have very specific requirements on those huge expensive vaults and safes. And those requirements vary a lot depending on how much product you actually want to store and what product it is. You need to consider both the quantity and its value to determine the specific level of security that's needed. There's actually 11 levels. Yeah.
Seems like a pretty a big math problem. Like you get one from column A, 2 from column B, and multiply it together, and you get this number, and that's how big your vault needs to be, or something like that.
That's actually exactly it, pretty much. Yeah. If people are interested in getting a dealer's license and enter the psychedelics market, we at CannDelta are more than happy to help with that licensing process, getting the security in place, and building out the general facility.
Good, because people need help. I mean, just even hearing, the nursery and the micro, the bigger facilities, and then in the bigger facilities, sort of the perimeter, and then the interior and the zone and the working rooms and the grow rooms, like it is not easy. And there's the balance of, like, obviously compliance as being the floor, but the ceiling needs to be where you feel comfortable, or sort of the assessed risk. And that changes by facility, by location, by team, by what product you have, by how much. And that, I think, takes people like CannDelta that have seen it all or close to it all, and understand sort of how regulators look at it, how companies are looking at it, and put people in sort of in the right sort of category and place.
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing I see is inefficient systems. And these inefficiencies end up giving you costs in time, and time is money.
Yeah. And look, all these people are rushing to get to market like that. Everybody's trying to get their facilities up and the security in place and get the licensing so they can get product out the door. And product out the door every day that's not out the door is just, you're just spending money on all the things, right? Well, Dennis, I really appreciate sort of you walking us through sort of the thought processes, certainly around retail, micro, nursery, and then sort of bigger facilities as well, because I think it's helpful to have that base of knowledge as you sort of enter the space or operating the space, to see what some of your people you're talking to are dealing with on a regular basis.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. It's been a lot of fun. Always happy to chat with you. Let me know if there's anything else.
I will. I absolutely will. I don't need security in my basement, but I will let you know as questions come in around security. Thanks, Dennis.
No problem, Jay.
That was Denis Adigamov of the CannDelta team. If you like this podcast, please rate and review our show. Thank you for joining us on B of C Live today. We're able to do what we do thanks to our ongoing partners, including Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CannDelta, Headset, Gallagher, and Torque & Main.